Victor Gyokeres or Victor Osimhen, if either were possible, who would be the better option for Manchester United? So the pros with Gyokeres are that he's exactly the type of centre forward that suits Amorim's build-up strategy against aggressive man-to-man presses, being very good technically when receiving direct long passes into his chest or feet, but also when using his pace to spin into the channel, isolating the defender in a 1v1 and then driving the attack forward on his own, before then having the dribbling, composure and ball manipulation to allow him to create his own shooting opportunities, which is an attribute that people massively overlook when judging forwards. Osimhen is also highly capable when receiving long balls from deeper positions, however his ability to link play comes more through his physicality and aerial ability, not having the same sort of technical ability as Gyokeres when it comes to linking play with his feet, particularly in congested areas, and whilst he also specialises when spinning into the channels, chasing direct passes and driving the attack forward, I wouldn't say that he has the same close control dribbling or ball manipulation around the box in order to create his own chances as Gyokeres does from these situations. However, when I come on to what Gyokeres lacks in just a minute, you'll see this is where Osimhen is arguably the best in the world. And so that got me thinking, considering the amount of money United are spending this summer, would we not have been better off just moving to a 3-5-2 and signing both of Gyokeres and Osimhen rather than going for the likes of Cunha and Mbeumo as interior forwards? Well, even though it's obviously not going to happen at this point, it is an interesting thought experiment, and if you are someone who says no, watch till the end of the video because I actually think the tactical theory I've come up behind this actually makes a lot of sense. But before I come on to that, a quick reminder, if you do want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to dragonjersey.com. They've got a variety of different new season jerseys when they do come out, including the Manchester United shirts when they are released, as well as a variety of different retro shirts, including this Manchester United 2006-2007 long-sleeved home shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, which they did send me alongside this PSG Anelka shirt from the 95-96 season. If you use code ATLANTIS30 at checkout, you will get 30% off all orders over $100, or for orders under that you can use code ATLANTIS at checkout to get a 10% discount. So I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. So whilst you could definitely argue that Victor Gyokeres is one of the, if not the best centre forward in the world, when he has space to run into from the middle into the final third, either through central or wider areas, the thing that does concern me with his potential signing is that I think Amorim may be overly focused on opponents who press us aggressively high up the pitch during the build-up phase when looking at the centre forward he wants. Whilst Gyokeres could have huge success at the start of the season if signed, I think eventually teams start to think that the risk of leaving their centre-backs isolated against Gyokeres in space around the halfway line is not worth the potential benefit of winning the ball back high up the pitch in the press, and so instead they begin to adapt their tactical setup against United, refraining from pressing as aggressively high up the pitch and start to drop off a lot deeper, keeping their fullbacks and central midfielders a lot closer to the centre-backs, reducing the space that Gyokeres has to run into. See, against deeper defensive shapes, whilst United are going to be able to push them back into their defensive third a lot more frequently throughout a game, this is where I think Gyokeres could be less effective and crossing situations could actually be the best avenue to goal. And this is why initially at the start of the year, I was talking about signing Victor Osimhen alongside Dwight McNeil. See, football's a simple game, but what's happened is that fans who people would refer to as casuals, who previously maybe 4 or 5 years ago, would have undervalued the role of tactics in the success of a team, pinning everything on individual players' ability, as well as of course their passion and desire, have now flipped to completely overcomplicating the tactical side of the game, pushing certain tactical setups and discrediting others without actually thinking from first principles. I mean, think about it simply. United and other sides such as Arsenal have been struggling to break down opponents who are prepared to sit in deep and compact defensive shapes around their box where the space between the lines becomes incredibly congested. However, just think about it logically, if the space between the lines centrally is reduced, because the defensive shape as a whole, but the wide players in particular, are sitting a lot narrower, that must mean that there is space somewhere else in another area of the pitch. But where is that space? Well, it's out wide. See, whilst Gyokeres thrives when running in behind high defensive lines in the middle third, and when it comes to linking play, receiving incisive passes through the centre into his feet in more congested areas, he becomes less effective against deeper defensive shapes when the space is reduced. However, Osimhen is the opposite. He's not as good technically when it comes to linking play in congested areas, but inside of the box, he is probably the biggest aerial threat in world football. And so if you had Gyokeres and Osimhen as a front two, against opponents who man-to-man press United aggressively high up the pitch during the build-up phase, You've now got Osimhen and Gyokeres in particular, who offer repeated outballs into the channels and can then drive the ball forward into the final third on their own, with Gyokeres being a massive goal scoring threat from these type of situations. However, if the opposition instead decide to drop off and refrain from pressing in order to stop Gyokeres from being able to do this, now it's Osimhen who becomes the bigger threat inside of the box, which creates a tactical dilemma for the opposition. They don't want to drop deep continuously and allow United to easily progress the ball into their final third, as now they have to deal with Osimhen's aerial threat from crossing situations inside of their box. But if they look to squeeze higher up the pitch in order to prevent these type of situations, now they are playing into Gyokeres' hands. And so if the opposition chooses to sit deep, you now have Osimhen as the main threat, and United can push them back into their own defensive third, use quick switches of play to get the wing backs in crossing positions in space, and putting quality crosses into the box for him to attack. I also think overall Theo Hernandez would be a better left wing back option than Dwight McNeil when it comes down to purely crossing ability. Other than Trent, there aren't too many players who are better crossers off the ball than Dwight McNeil. Yes, I have mentioned him. I know people don't like me talking about him because we haven't been linked with him, and he doesn't have a fancy foreign name, so he obviously can't be a good signing. But it's not just about picking the best players for each position. You've got to think of which particular attributes and traits are going to get the best out of your key players, and for me, Dwight McNeil gets the best out of Victor Osimhen. Now, Dwight McNeil did pick up a 4-month injury in December, which was the first major injury of his career, only coming back at the end of April. But if we go back to the previous season in 23-24, he completed the 6th most crosses into the penalty area of any player in the Premier League, and of the top 20, he had the highest XG assisted with a total of 8.8, higher than Trent that season with 7.2. And he also recorded the 9th highest XG assisted overall in the entire league. And when you look at his assists minus his XG assisted, which basically shows you the difference between the amount of assists a player should have got according to the XG model and how many they actually got, he had minus 2.8, showing that Everton were not converting the chances he was creating at the rate they should have, a lot of which did come through crossing situations. But even if you forget about the stats, from the eye test alone, you can see McNeil's crossing ability is elite. United have struggled when teams sit deep, not just under Ruben Amorim, but also for the past few seasons. However, put Victor Osimhen in the box and McNeil out wide, and use quick switches of play to get the ball out to him, over and underlapping runs to drag opposition players away from him, and McNeil crossing for Osimhen now gives you the ability to frequently create high-value goal-scoring opportunities throughout a match, even against teams who are going to sit deep and compact, who United usually struggle against. I mean, it really doesn't have to be that complicated, and there could be a simple solution to creating more chances. See, in isolation, I would say Theo Hernandez overall is a better left wing-back than Dwight McNeil. But my transfer strategy isn't simply just picking the best players for each position. What I'm looking at is how do United create against teams that sit deep and compact, and specifically how do you create high-value goal-scoring opportunities as frequently as possible for Victor Osimhen, or even if it wasn't someone like Osimhen and instead was someone like Alexander Sorloth, any centre forward with that sort of aerial dominance in the opposition's box. You can't tell me that Dorgu and Gyokeres is anywhere near as effective against a deep defensive block compared with McNeil and Osimhen. Yeah, but Dwight McNeil isn't good enough for Manchester United. Say the same people who also seem to think that Dorgu is good enough as a starting left wing back for United, but Dorgu is only 20. Okay, but McNeil isn't 26 until November, and it's still just kind of irrelevant. Either the player is good enough or he's not. If we don't create enough chances against deep defensive blocks next season because Dorgu's crossing isn't elite, the Premier League don't just give us some points back because Dorgu is only 20, do they? And also, yes, I know Dorgu is only 20, and so that may mean that he has a higher potential than McNeil in the long run, but number one, that doesn't mean that when he's 25, his crossing is going to be as good as Dwight McNeil's, does it? Or even forget crossing, his chance creating ability in general is the same illogical thinking as when people were saying, well, when Gyokeres was Højlund's age, okay, but he's not Højlund's age now in 2025. You can't just assume that because one player is younger, and the player they're being compared against at their age wasn't as good, that it's a dead given that the younger player develops their skill set to the level of the other player's ability by that specific age. Osimhen is an aerial specialist, McNeil is a crossing specialist, and that partnership is perfect for both players. The only reason people don't rate McNeil is simply because he isn't spoken about or hyped up on social media compared with other players. People also don't understand the value of statistics such as XG assisted and other chance creating and progressive passing metrics like that objectively show you how good McNeil is in comparison to other players. but also because he's English, and people love to say that English players are overrated, when not only is McNeil barely rated considering his output, but English players in general aren't really overrated anymore. Maybe they were around 2018-2019, but now I would argue that foreign players who come from foreign leagues end up being far more overrated than the English players who are being developed domestically. I mean, the eye test alone should show you how effective McNeil's crossing ability could be with Osimhen, but also his chance creating output considering he plays for Everton is insanely underrated. I mean, this season in the Premier League, when compared against every other attacking midfielder and winger, he ranked in the 94th percentile for his XG assisted, as well as the low to mid 90th percentiles for his crosses and passes into the penalty area. His assists, expected assists, key passes, long passes completed, and his successful take on completion rate, with his through balls and switches also ranking around the 80th to 90th percentile range as well. And you can go back through his previous Premier League FBref reports and see that this isn't a fluke either. He's been consistently producing impressive chance creating and progressive passing output year on year, improving steadily. He may not be a 20-year-old with a fancy foreign name who people can pretend is going to be the next Roberto Carlos, but as people seem to prioritise for certain players and then completely ignore for others, McNeil is Premier League proven over the past 5 years or so, passes the eye test and the statistical test, and has played as a hard-working left-sided midfielder for Sean Dyche at both Burnley and Everton, which is exactly the type of profile wide player who would be well suited to being converted to a left wing back, whilst also having the versatility to play on either side as a wing back, or even in a more centrally advanced position as he has done for Everton this season, in one of the two interior forward roles as well. And most importantly, in relation to the topic of this video, he would have been perfect for Victor Osimhen. And so overall, this is why I think coaches do need tactical versatility between systems, as I think a 3-5-2 system gets you closer to challenging to the Premier League title in a shorter amount of time compared with the 3-4-3, and Amorim wouldn't have to change this strategy or principles that he wants to use in and out of possession, just some slight alterations with the shape during certain phases of possession. And not only do I think a three-man midfield would have benefited the likes of Mainu, Ugarte and Bruno, who I think are all better suited to playing in a three than playing in a midfield double pivot, but it would have also allowed you to use Acuna and Mbeumo money on Osimhen and McNeil alongside Gyokeres, giving United all the benefits of Gyokeres on the transition against a high defensive line, alongside Osimhen's aerial ability against deep defensive blocks, which I think would have created a far more dangerous attack than the three of Cunha, Mbeumo and Gyokeres, all of whom are far better on the transition than they are against deeper defensive blocks. So let me know what you would have made of Gyokeres and Osimhen as a front two, and if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to dragonjersey.com. You can use code Atlantis at checkout to get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. And if you want to sign up to my Patreon to read any of my articles or get access to the Instagram discussion group chat, I'll leave that linked on the end screen now as well.